Hello, and thank you for joining me again today on the Finding Hope After Loss podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please leave a review or rating on Apple or Spotify. It only takes a moment and really helps the show reach more loss and infertility families. Today's business spotlight is on wild spring flowers. Here is what the owner had to say.
Hi, I'm Jordy with Wild Spring Flowers, located in Spring Lake, Utah. Wild Spring Flowers started in 2022 after we lost our first baby, Liam, who was stillborn in early 2022 after years of infertility. I started the flower farm to bring happiness back into my life after such a loss. I also wanted to provide free funeral arrangements and casket sprays for the funerals of other babies using my flowers. Our first harvest year was 2023, and I was also pregnant with our second child, Lily, at the time, via IVF. She was born prematurely due to severe preeclampsia at 24 weeks in November, and she lived for 25 days and died in December of 2023. Providing free funeral flowers has remained our biggest goal. We do U-Pick nights where people can come to our farm and pick their own flowers. And then we also host events at the farm, and I do wedding floristry and other special events as well. All other proceeds from the flower farm are going to help us to afford a gestational carrier, as I'm not able to carry any more children. The U-Pick events help us to provide free funeral flower services year-round, not just when I have flowers, because Mother Nature doesn't allow us to have flowers year-round. So the U-Picks help us provide this service no matter the time of year. I offer to bring the flowers to the cemetery, the funeral, or the church within Utah County, only because I'm a one-woman show. However, if family members want to come pick up a casket spray or arrangement from my home and take it to a funeral that is happening outside of Utah County, they are welcome to do that. You can contact me through my Instagram account, wildspring.flowers. I'm honored to create these pieces in honor of babies that have been lost just like mine.
Thank you so much for sharing about your amazing business with us. Today, I am talking with Susan. She went through infertility, miscarriage, and the loss of one of her twins a few weeks after birth. In this episode, she talks about her loss, along with the grief of her miscarriage and twin loss. She also talks about the anticipatory grief she feels regarding her surviving special needs twin daughter. Hello, everyone. Today, I am here with Susan. Susan, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Susan. I am 48 years old. I live in Montreal, Canada, and I am mom to 3 children, Matthew, who's 22, and twin girls, Ava and Elizabeth. Ava will be 18 years old in 8 days.
Wow.
And Elizabeth is my baby, a twin bee, and she died at 6 weeks old. Well, 39 days to be exact. And so, yeah, I'm happily married to my husband Gary, who is stepdad to these children. I'm no longer with the father of my children. We're divorced, but we co-parent very well. And that's a little intro of me.
So do you mind talking a little bit more about your story?
No, not at all. So I struggled with infertility, even having my son. So my son was a natural pregnancy, term birth, all that, but I was in my early 20s and it took over a year to get pregnant, which is not, you have a feeling when something is not right. Everyone's like, just wait, all the things. But after a year of actively trying, the doctors were like, okay, so let's see what's going on. And then right when I was about to start, I got pregnant with him. And so I thought, oh, okay, must have been just a fluke, one of those things. And so his birth was completely normal, pregnancy was normal, no issues. And then it was, okay, let's have another child. Got pregnant again, had a miscarriage at 5-6 weeks, super early, but incredibly devastating because it took a year to get there again. And so then the thought is, gosh, this can take another year. So that was that. And then you grieve. It was hard because it was early. So some people didn't even know. And the people who did know were very compassionate. But I always felt that I couldn't be honest with how broken I was because it was early. And because whatever the statistic is, this many pregnancies end in miscarriage, blah, blah, blah. And so you feel like you can't really grieve the way you want to. And so then we continued to try, and it just wasn't happening. And so we started fertility treatments. Didn't do IVF. We started with IUI, and we were successful after the first insemination. And so it was, I can't, like, the journey was, everyone was very supportive. Everything ran smoothly. It was really, really lucky, I felt. And then I've got a positive pregnancy test. Oh my gosh. Went in for the viability scan. Oh my gosh, there's two. And so, holy cow, it was just elation. Like, it was, and then I had the worst ultrasound tech ever, because I started crying when she told me there was two, and she said, it's early.
Gosh,
What?
like, thanks.
I,
So helpful of you.
it was really bonkers. I was not happy. And then when we met with the doctor after the scan, I told him, I'm like, and then he said, true, it's early. And he said, very true, that some people sometimes get pregnant with twins but don't even know it, because not everyone gets a scan at 7 weeks. And there is vanishing twin syndrome is a thing. And he explained it. He goes, but I'm not trying to give you false hope, but both embryos are the same size. It looked like things were looking like it was a positive. Because sometimes there's like a big discrepancy in the size of it and how the heart's beating and all that jazz. So that pregnancy, proceeded, had some complications at 12 weeks, had a little bit of bleeding, all that type of stuff, but everything was really under control. Babies seemed okay. And then at 23 weeks, I went into labor, but I didn't know it. I started having a little bit of bleeding, went into the birthing center. They checked me. Everything seemed okay. But they said, you know what? We're going to keep you overnight. We're going to do an ultrasound tomorrow morning, because it was very late at night. Okay. They kept me late at night, went for an ultrasound. At the ultrasound, they saw I was 4 centimeters dilated and I had protruding membranes. So they said, you can't get up. You need to stay put. And so I was lying down, and they shifted my stretcher so that my ankles were higher than my head to kind of help the gravity. And then they wheeled me up to the birthing center, and it was complete chaos at that point. I didn't feel any contractions. I had no idea I was in labor. And they were trying to stop because I was at 4 centimeters. And the issue is that I was in a hospital that did not have a NICU. Births before 34 weeks they couldn't handle birth, before 34 weeks. And I was at 23. And so they said to me, here's your situation. You're in a very big gray zone of viability for your babies. We're going to get a neonatologist from our sister hospital to come and explain to you all you need to know. And so he did. He came. He explained that survival rates for 23-week-old or 23-weekers there wasn't data at the time. Now, I don't know what the reality is today. This was in 2006. At the time, the data was very sketchy. Survival rates were kind of unknown. It was really a crapshoot. And he really wanted me to know this, because you need to know. He goes, by law, hospitals are required to, if a baby is born at 25 weeks gestation, and this is law in my province of Quebec in Canada, 25 weeks gestation and more, by law, the doctors are required to do everything they can to save the baby. Before that, the parents can dictate what to do. So we can choose to have the baby and comfort them, or we can choose to have the baby and tell the medical professionals to do everything they can. Extraordinary measures. So it's basically, do we want extraordinary measures or not? Because they were 23-week-old gestation. So that's a hard decision to make. And everyone was looking at us. And I said, can you give us a minute? So they left the room, and I looked at my ex-husband, and we looked at each other, and I said, everything we went through to try for these, we didn't know if they were girls. So these babies, we didn't want to know the sex. I said, we have to try. We have to try. And we were both in agreement. And so they came back, and we said, please save our babies. And so they said, okay. And that was an immediate transfer to the sister hospital that had a NICU, So they did that, transferred me, gave me all the things to try and keep everything, prevent labor from progressing. Still, I had no pain. It's like, this is labor. Like my son was like painful as like anything when I had him. And I'm like, this doesn't feel like labor to me, but whatever. And then I stabilized. Nothing progressed, which was huge. So I stayed in actually a birthing room for days. And then when they saw that it was not progressing, they moved me into what they call the antepartum area. So all the women who are kind of, in the same predicament as me, different levels. Some are able to get up. All the women who have to be hospitalized on bed rest, I just couldn't get up. I had to stay again with my head lower than my feet on my back, and I couldn't get up. I couldn't use the bathroom, couldn't get up to eat. So I had to use bedpans. I had to eat in that position. I had to sleep in that position. And my ex asked at the time to the doctors, how long can she stay like this? And they said, she's lucky if she lasts 5 days. And I lasted 5 weeks.
Wow.
They said to me, if you can make it to 28 weeks, it's a huge victory. They said, if you can make it to 30, it's an even bigger victory. And so I made it to 27 weeks, 6 days gestation. And my
Which
girls
is
were
amazing, though.
It was intense. It was really hard. At first, you're just kind of on high alert. I didn't want to sneeze. I didn't want to cough. I didn't want to do anything because all I could think of was protruding membranes. That phrase traumatized me. Like I was like, what? That's like, achoo. I thought, I don't know what I thought. So yeah, so I did. I went into labor in the middle of the night, but it was intense back pain. I didn't have back labor with my son. So I just thought I have back issues to begin with. And my back had been bothering me for a while. So I thought, oh, I need to shift, whatever. And then we realized it was labor. Called my, my ex. I said, you need to come right now. And it was like 5 a.m. My daughter, Ava, who was twin A, she just like, as they were rushing to get me ready, they were trying to put in an IV. They were paging the OB on call because it was 5 a.m. Ava just came out. She's like, I'm here. I'm ready to go. She came out intact in her sac. Her amniotic sac wasn't even broken. And when they came to me, they see this baby and they're like, oh my gosh, she delivered. And so they grabbed Ava and took care of her. And then finally, the doctor on call finally showed up. I mean, the doctor wasn't even there. And they're like, she needs to go to the OR because my babies were breech. And so Elizabeth was coming down breech and they transferred me to the OR and it was general anesthesia because there was no time for anything. And the last thing I remember because they were small, maybe they were obviously like pretty premature, general anesthesia affects the fetus. This is, and the last words I remember was, everyone ready, 90 seconds, cut to baby. Like that was it, 90 seconds, cut to baby. And I thought, what? And then I was out. So yeah, Elizabeth was born 32 minutes after Ava, and they were quite sick at birth. I had a UTI, which is what triggered my labor. I didn't know that. I found that after. And they were sick as a result. They both had infections, and it was quite touchy at first, but they seemed to be doing well. And about a week after their birth, we found out doing a routine scan that they both suffered grade 3 intraventricular hemorrhages. So they both had brain bleeds. We didn't know what that meant. It sounded terrible. And it was really a wait and see type of situation. Elizabeth started to really destabilize. And so they decided and she was getting fluid accumulation on her brain. And so she needed to put a shunt in to drain the fluid. And it was transporting her by ambulance now to a children's hospital. The NICU in this hospital just wasn't equipped because they weren't a pediatric hospital. It was a NICU, but now you needed pediatric neurosurgeons and all that. And I feel very fortunate. I'm from Montreal and we have 2 spectacular children's hospitals here. And so we were transported to the children's hospital. They did the surgery on Elizabeth that day. Ava crashed on Christmas Eve, and they brought Ava along because they said they try and keep twins together. Ava crashed on Christmas Eve, same scenario. Her brain now had pressure due to fluid. Christmas Eve, 2006, she had emergency surgery to release pressure, put in a shunt, drain the fluid. And then again, they both stabilized. And really, turned a corner. Ava came off the vent. She wasn't on a vent for very long. Elizabeth always struggled a little bit to get off the vent. Ava moved up into intermediate care, which was great. And on January 7th of 2007, I got to hold my babies together. And that was huge because I didn't know if they'd come home and I didn't know what was going to happen. And the fact that I actually was holding them together was huge. And that's because one nurse decided to take Ava and put her on a portable monitor and bring her over to the intensive side because she was an intermediate and said, she's here to see her sister. And I held them and I thought, this is what it's going to be like at home. Like, this is what it's going to be like. And I was supposed to give Elizabeth a bath that day. And then we had visitors come and I never got a chance to. And before I left for the night, the nurse said, don't worry, Mom, we can do it tomorrow. And then we got the call at about 3:30 in the morning. You have 2 babies in the NICU and you get a phone call at 3:30. It's usually never good. Elizabeth developed NEC and EC, so necrotizing enterocolitis. They had both had it already at this point. This was about 5 weeks-ish. They were about 5 weeks old. And it resolved in both of them. But apparently it came back with a vengeance because they went to change her diaper in the middle of the night and it was full of blood. And they rushed her to X-ray and her intestines were completely inflamed. It wasn't good. So we rushed in. And let's not forget, I also had a 4-year-old. So we were babies in a NICU. I was suffering from 5 weeks of lying on my back and my muscles had atrophied and that was intense. And I had a 4-year-old at home and finally got some strength back, rushed to the hospital. And we were just looking at her. They had her incubator like broken down. So all the sides were down and she was on way more monitors than she had ever been. Her heart rate was like 200. It was through the roof. I touched her. She was burning hot. And I just stared at her. I couldn't stop staring at her. What happened? And the nurse was like, I don't understand. And like, the doctor will be here in a minute. And as we stared at her, her dad was behind me and he said, I think she's trying to tell us something. And so then we met with the doctors and they explained about the NEC and they explained what they could do, take her to surgery and all that. But they said she was very, very unstable and she was very, very weak. And they weren't sure she would make the trip into surgery. And what did we want to do? And so I had the idea of my baby dying alone in an operating room with strangers was abhorrent to me. And her dad's words were in my head. I think she's trying to tell us something. I can't explain it. And we decided it wasn't fair. She was 3 pounds. She was burning with fever. And her heart rate indicated she was in a lot of pain. And we knew that the amount of intestine they were going to have to cut out was just, she had severe brain damage and now it was too much. And so we made the decision to just hold her. And they moved us into the isolation room, which is a room for families whose babies are at end of life. And we sat with her and I held her from 9 a.m. They took her vent at around 3:30 and they took everything off of her. And for the first time, we were able to see her with no tubes, no tape, her little face. Whole family was able to come and see her. My son was able to come and see her. They brought Ava in to come and see her. And I held her from 9 a.m. until she stopped breathing at 3:30 and her heart stopped at 4. And that was how we had to say goodbye to Elizabeth. And after we did her funeral, I had to keep coming back because her sister was still there. And I can't even put into words how difficult it was having to come back and seeing her spot. And it was really intense. But Ava was there. Ava needed me, and you kind of put your grief on the back burner. You really don't have a choice because I had another baby who needed me. But people say some really insensitive things when you lose a baby. And, oh, two with brain damage, how could you take care of two? She's with God now and all this nonsense. And I'm not real I used to be religious, but this experience did it for me. And I know a lot of people find faith, or their faith gets strengthened when trauma happens. For me, it was the complete opposite. I prayed harder than I have ever prayed in my life. I prayed with everything I had. And I can't live in a world where these things are meant to be. It's too difficult for me. And maybe one day I'll get over that, but it's been 18 years. I'm not sure it's going to happen. But I had someone tell me, well, at least you have another baby. So apparently twins are spare tires in case one.
People, think before you say these things.
It's really stupid. And no one would ever think of saying, like, if you have two children who aren't the same age and you lose one, no one's ever going to say, well, at least you have your other kid. But with twins, it's like as if, well, you got a bonus baby, so it doesn't matter. It's really stupid. So yeah, but the grief was really hard because people around me kept having babies, and then seeing twin girls really trigger me. Until this day, seeing twin girls triggers me. Hearing of people who have twin pregnancies that have zero complications, who make it to term, it's really hard. And I'm not walking around like, bitter, but it weighs really heavy on my heart, and I have to really pick and choose sometimes who and what I do. And so living with grief, but putting in the back burner was something that I did. And then, and then living life. Ava came home 3 months after she was born. She was actually discharged on her due date, which was, and her first year of life was intense, filled with therapies and this and that, and just to find out what's going to happen to her because her brain damage was really extensive as well. And no one could tell us, as it is with most neurological issues, how that's going to manifest. Her neurologist was really clear and said, look, I wish I could predict why some kids with the damage that Ava has can walk into my office, and some kids that have less damage than what we see on Ava's scans can't speak. Because if I could predict it, I'd be on a beach somewhere. He's like, it's really, the brain is just really unpredictable, and it's really, we take her lead. And yeah, so Ava, she, we took her lead, and she is almost 18 years old now. She is significantly disabled. She's got spastic quadriplegic cerebral palsy, which means the cerebral palsy affects 4 limbs, and spastic is her muscle tone is quite high. She also has intellectual disability, global development delay. So she is like childlike, very toddler-ish. She's verbal, but usually you have to know her to understand what she's saying because her speech is also affected. And so she can communicate, but it's like a 2-year-old, right? The parents understand everything a 2-year-old is saying, and relatives are like, what? So her family usually understands her the most, but she can get her point across. She has told many a nurse and doctor that they are the worst, which is really funny. I'm the worst. Bedtime, you're the worst mom ever. She will say that very clearly.
Like, well, when she's determined to get that point across.
She is. She's very determined to get that point across. And so, yes, she has epilepsy. She has a chronic lung condition because she's had some silent aspiration because she's got excessive salivation. She had scoliosis. She had a major spinal fusion months ago. So Ava's life has been very difficult in terms of just her disabilities and caring for her. She's 100% dependent for all her care. She's tube fed. She has a diaper. And so, but the thing is, it's all we know with her, right? And we kind of roll with the punches. And she's great, and she's beautiful and smart and funny. And we talk about her sister with her all the time. And I tell you, she'll be in class. She has no concept of what's appropriate, not appropriate. So she will be in class and all of a sudden like be laughing and go, "Oh, I'm sad." And we'll be, "Why are you sad?" "My sister died." That's what she said randomly and makes everybody uncomfortable. It's not funny, but
Right, but
and because she'll be like, "La la la, oh, I'm sad." So
that's
it's like
just the way.
you have to see it. And it's because she knows that if you speak of someone dying, it's a sad thing. So she knows, oh, I need to act sad and say this randomly out of the blue to a class, and everyone is uncomfortable. So, and she does it all the time. So it is funny. I mean, it's funny. Yeah. And so that's pretty much, the life of me and my kids. Unfortunately, my ex-husband and I, our marriage didn't survive. But like I said, we co-parent well together. I am remarried. And I've always said that it takes a special person to take on a family like mine because, like it or not, I always say I come with baggage. And our life revolves around Ava. It has to. The type of house we have, the type of vehicle we purchase, the type of things we can do. She needs medical equipment. It's financial, it's emotional, it's drop of a hat. All of a sudden, we have to stay in the PICU because she has a surprise pneumonia. And he chose that life. Like this is our life. We don't choose a life of grief. We don't choose a life of caring for special needs. We adapt, we do it. They're our children and we love them. But to choose it, to me, takes a special kind of person. So I'm really lucky to have him. And yeah. So it's a
You
lot.
have you have just, I mean, you've just been through so much. And it's just like grief on top of grief, on top of more grief. And it's just, I mean, I can understand like the anger you feel towards religion and things like that. I felt that way too. I was like, I prayed every day for my daughter and she was stillborn. And I'm like, like this sucks. Why did you do this to me?
Yeah. Yeah. And I always admire, like, I want to find comfort in it. I want something to find comfort in. And I want people to be comfortable with me. Like, if I have someone who I know who takes comfort from religion and they want to say it, I'm not going to be like, don't talk to me about it. I don't want people to project it onto me. Like, oh, God has a plan for you. Like, I don't want to hear that. But if people are talking about their own experience and what they feel, of course, right? I mean, everyone's journey is their journey. But I have to say, I did put my grief on the back burner, and I feel this is important to mention, and I had a complete breakdown 8 years after my daughter died. Complete breakdown. I was off work. I it, for 4 months, I think it was, kept it to myself. I told no one I had a breakdown. My husband knew, obviously, and one friend at work because I had the breakdown at work and was in a very dark place. I mean, I was afraid for myself and went straight to my doctor's office. I was lucky enough that I can call and I was like sobbing on the phone. They're like, okay, you need to come in and we need to fix this. And what I didn't even realize was my doctor was telling me that I was experiencing what they call an anniversary reaction. I didn't know it. I didn't know what date it was. I didn't know what that was, but it's a thing. And that day was the day, it was 8 years to the day that I went into the hospital bleeding, not knowing I was about to go into labor. And he was like, is this a traumatic time for you? And I was like, what day is it? And I went, oh, because that whole lead up, it was October, they were born in November, and then the holidays, always a very dark time. And that year, for various reasons, it broke. I broke and I couldn't function, couldn't get out of bed. I mean, it's like, can't function, felt suicidal. It was very intense. And I realized after, therapy and all that, it's putting the grief on the back burner. It's not talking about it. It's being there for some other people all the time, which I have to be with my daughter. Like I still have Ava, whether I like it or not, right? So it's to find that balance, but learning to grieve, even though it was 8 years later before I actually went through this intense process, is so important. No matter how long it takes, no matter how exhausting it might be to your loved ones, that was a really important lesson I learned because I almost lost my life over it. And then what would have been of my daughter and my son, who often, unfortunately, gets lost in the shuffle of our lives. And that's really difficult to take as a parent because he's an individual and he deserves having parents who are present. And yeah, there's a lot of guilt there too when he was younger, taking care of his sister and all that. Yeah.
The mom guilt is so hard on all aspects. We feel like we're never good enough no matter what we're doing. We feel guilty because we're spending too much time over here or too much time over here. It can just eat you alive.
It can. It can. And I'm completely obsessive over it. It's really like to the point where when my girls were both in the NICU, I wanted to make sure I spent enough time with each. I literally timed myself. I'm going to be 30 minutes with her, and then I got to be 30 minutes with her. Someone said to me, "Are you crazy?" And I thought, "Whoa, no, I have to."
They
So
have to
yeah,
be equal, right?
it's so I become so irrational in trying to be fair. It's really crazy. But yeah.
No, I do understand that though, because I can be the same way about things. It's just that constant feeling of not being good enough, no matter what we do. And I
Yeah.
think, what you said about the grief is really important because that is what we're kind of expected to do. People put this timeline on it, like, okay, it's been a year, like, let's move on, let's be normal, like, you shouldn't be sad anymore. You have other kids, just whatever people say. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, your
Abs-
story shows like even 5,
abs-
10 years later.
yes. It has impacts if you don't allow it. And it's almost like you have a funeral. We had a funeral for her and we buried her. And then there's like a little grace period after. And then you see it. Everyone else's life is like normal.
Yeah.
And you feel like you're screaming into a void. I am
Mhm.
never going to be normal again. Can you guys get that? And and look, it'll be my daughter's birthday. My daughter's birthday will be in 8 days. And that's difficult because it wasn't a good day, the day they were born. It was a day full of fear, intense fear. I compare it with my son's birthday. It was joyous. It was, and we didn't know the sex. So, like, it was the whole, it's a birthday moment, very old school. And the first grandson on both sides, and the first grandchild, I should say, on both sides, compared to their birthday, grief, fear, no holding of your baby at the moment of, none of that. So it's not a day full of happy memories. And then coming up on her 18th, that 18th anniversary of her death, it's been 18 years. And I will break down and sob. I don't do it every day. I don't do it every day. But there are moments of guilt. There are moments of what if we had done the surgery? Maybe we should have given her a chance. There are intense moments of seeing, hearing other children dying, anticipatory grief. My daughter's condition, while is not, she doesn't have a terminal illness or anything. She's got conditions that could potentially, she's got epilepsy. She gets a lot of seizures at night. So, SUDEP is real, is a real problem. She almost died of pneumonia 2 years ago, literally crashed before my eyes. And I thought I had never been as afraid as I did the day my daughters were born. And I called family. Like it was in, her body was shutting down. She was septic and it was really bad. So I have this grief, and then I feel anticipatory grief because I feel afraid that I will outlive her. So it's, we don't know, right? And so you have to kind of prepare.
It's just such a challenge. I mean, how do you find time to care for you, or do you care for yourself?
You have to make time. So I have to say, there is a benefit of no longer being married to her dad in that she splits her time. So I will be fully transparent. I get a week off, right? Every other week. You're never really off because we're in constant communication with each other about school. Do you have this at your house? Do I have this in appointments, we typically go together to all the appointments, whether she's here or not. Whoever she's with at that moment is who brings her, but the other parent shows up. And so, but in terms of waking up at night to take care of her and doing the whole routine, there is some time. So there's that. Silver linings, right? That's a silver lining in my particular situation, and I'll take it. And I try to do things that are important to me. So I try and take trips with my husband, and I try and do little things like get a manicure. And it's it's fluffy and it's superficial, but it's something that normal people do, I say, because I don't feel very normal and I want to do it because I like looking at nice nails. So I will go and
And it's
and
something just for you, you know?
just for me that I enjoy. And so I do it. So I have to schedule everything. My schedule is ridiculous. Even to go to see family. Like I haven't seen my sister who lives in the same city as me in months. It's just stupid. But I work full time and I'm pulled in 50,000 directions and all I can do is hope and have that my loved ones have grace with me and realize that it's not because I'm blowing anybody off. It's because sometimes I just need to be alone because I'm everywhere all the time and it's really, really hard and it affects relationships and I don't have a lot of friends. I have friends, but like friends. I don't. Like if I have a crisis and I'm sobbing, I'm alone. There's no one I'll call. And it's not to be like, oh, poor me. It's just my reality. It's just my reality. And so
I
it's
mean, yeah, that does make it hard when you're, doing when you're having to work full time, when you're having to care for your daughter, I mean, you just have no time.
yeah. Yeah. Like literally I have one friend who I like to see and have lunch with we do it every 4 months and we have lunch and then we put it in our calendars. But how many times do we have to push that? Because something gets in the way and it ends up extending. So I see her twice a year, you know? It's work from home, so I don't have that social work circle and I like working from home. I'm a bit of a homebody anyways and I enjoy that. But you do feel the sting of lack of social stuff going on, you know?
Yeah, I worked at home for 5 years and it has tons of benefits, but you definitely don't get that like connection with your coworkers.
Yeah.
But now
Yes.
that I'm having to go back in some, I'm like, nah, I was okay without the connection. No.
I do go in sometimes. And what's funny is that I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go in and go see people. And then I'm like a hermit in the corner. I don't want to see anybody.
I know. I'm like,
It
why
makes
do we do this?
it really makes no sense. But I have to tell you, the value of having this flexible type of work environment with a child like my daughter Ava, there's it's intense because I am in and out, and I can't do a strict 9 to 5 where I have to be there at all times. I need the flexibility of, okay, well, I missed part of my morning, so I'm going to work later here, or I'll work on a Saturday and stuff like that. That having control of my schedule is really crucial.
Which I
It's
know
really,
sometimes can be hard to find with some
yes,
jobs.
yes, yeah, absolutely. So I'm very lucky in that. That's the type of environment I'm in right now. Yeah.
So like right after your loss, do you feel like your family was very supportive of your situation?
Yes. Yes, they were. As much as they could be. I mean, it's again, it's this we were all in the mindset of, okay, now everyone's energy goes into Ava, right? What can we do for her? And so everyone put all their energy in her. And so the whole grief just was not dealt with. It wasn't dealt with because of where we had to put our energies. It was really a strange dynamic and it wasn't done on purpose. It was just the circumstances. Like when I look at it now, I think someone who had lost their baby in that same scenario, I could envision myself have been like locked in my room, eating ice cream all day, not functioning. That just wasn't an option.
Yeah.
And I think the family did the same thing, right? People would check in on me. There was, how are you doing and all that. But then it all became about Ava. How's she doing? How's she doing? Right. And then no one really talked about Elizabeth. People would on her birthday, but it's funny because as the years go by, less and less people will remember her on her birthday. Less and less people will message me. Today, on her birthday, 2 people will consistently message me on her birthday. One person will message me on the day she died. I have nobody who messages me on the day she dies except for one person consistently. And I find that really hard to take. I find that offensive. If I'm honest, it's offensive. Because it's not a bad thing to get a text with a heart thinking of you today.
Doesn't take that much time to send, you know?
It's absolutely no time to send, to put it in your calendar, to put it in your phone. In this day and age, there's really no reason to not remember dates. Like just put that sucker in your phone if you have to. And it's the way it is. So, I have my sister who will message me on their birthday and on Elizabeth's the anniversary of her death, and one friend. Especially the anniversary of the death, because on birthdays, people see it on Facebook. Like I'll make a post on Facebook
Yeah.
wishing my daughters a happy birthday. So everybody comes out of the woodwork, wishing you and your girls, wishing your girls a happy birthday, sweet Elizabeth, all that jazz. Nobody remembers January 8th, except for one friend. So she's very close in my heart. I don't see her very often, but the fact that she does that, I wish they all did that. And I get it. Everyone's life is busy. I feel like I'm sounding bitter. It's not that. It's just I wish people would understand that reaching out to someone on a date like that means everything.
Yeah,
It
it really does.
everything, right? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's hard when we feel like we're the only ones who are remembering them. Like we just want to know that other people remember them too, that they're not just
Yeah.
that
I
they're
know.
important.
Yeah. I have a cousin who, quite frankly, I have lots of cousins. I have like lots. We're like my big fat Greek wedding. I'm the Greek girl. I'm not Greek, but yeah. And she's a second cousin, actually. So my cousin's daughter. And she, she doesn't even live in the same town as me. There's a big age gap. And she was about 12 when the girls were born and when Elizabeth died. And they came to her funeral. She didn't get to see Ava because she was too young to be let into the NICU at the time. She reaches out to me often. Well, often, but she will say, I had a dream of Elizabeth. I dreamt of Elizabeth. I want to let you know. She really connected, even though she never got to meet Elizabeth. I can't even tell you how meaningful that is to me, that she reaches out to me like that and she will periodically talk about her. It's everything to me. I wish more people would do that. But, it's what it is. But it does, like, don't, yeah, it's I have a friend who lost a son recently, and I was just gutted. And I wanted to like I wanted to drop everything and just like be with her all the time. Like I felt like I was projecting because I was like, I can't let someone go while the circumstances were completely different. I wanted to like grab this person and like sit with them and be like, what do you want? What do you need? What can I do? Because you're in hell right now and I want to be everything that no one was for me, for you.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's rough. Especially my daughter, my daughter goes to a school with a lot of kids with complexities. And so having classmates die is not something that's unusual. And that is something that's difficult.
Yeah.
To live in an environment where children dying is just something that can happen, it sucks.
And I imagine, yeah, every time I'm sure it can just trigger that in you too.
It does, because you think, how can I survive something like this again? Right? Like I don't how. And then it also feels like amongst this circle of parents with these kids in my daughter's school setting, it almost feels like who's next? That's the vibe. Yeah, that's my daughter's classmate died last March. Shocked. And then that's what it feels like. Who's next? Because that's what you feel like is going to happen. And that's not a fun thing to experience.
Oh yeah, no, it's like when
It's
you're already dealing with the grief of having lost one and then worried about losing another one. It's just, I mean, two different kinds of grief, but still like two horrible things to
it
deal with.
is. It is. And you envision yourself thinking, and this I never I've never said this out loud, but sometimes you envision, okay, what would I do for her funeral? How would I do it? Would I do it different than her sister? And I feel like if I were to tell someone that, they'd be like, okay, you need to stop. And I don't disagree. I need to stop. But you can't turn off your brain.
Yeah.
And it's things you think about. I mean, it is. It's things you think about. And she's turning 18, which has a lot of legal implications in terms of guardianship over her. medical decisions. We need to do legal paperwork and all that stuff. And you got to redo your wills and all that stuff. And so the question of all our mortalities comes up when you have to do a will, and who will take care of her in the event of your death and all that fun stuff. And so then it's like the chicken or the egg. What's better, leaving her behind, not knowing who's going to care for her? Because that's another big deal. Like, she leaving her, who is going to take care of her when I die? She's going to be in a home with people who don't understand her, who don't. It's terrifying. It's terrifying. It literally keeps me up at night. Like, I will lie in bed awake just staring at the ceiling going, how can I leave her behind? So it's rough.
All these things, like, you just don't know about a person by just looking at them, like you could pass somebody on the street, you don't know what they're going through.
Yeah. You don't. Exactly. You don't. And I always, when someone, how you doing? You want the truth or you want the generic answer?
You want me to just say good and how are you? Because that's
Yeah,
not
like when you asked me when we first met, like, how are you? It's true. You just don't know. And my life has had so many ups and downs. I've made decisions I'm not proud of. I've done things that in hindsight I would never do before. And I've really put myself in a mindset of when I hear things about others, I go, did you know what so and so did? I'm like, well, I don't know their life. And I can't, I'm not going to judge someone. Like, I won't sit and like gossip about someone because so and so's, I can't do it. I can't, because I don't know what goes on behind closed doors. I haven't walked in anyone else's shoes. That's what my life has taught me, because I've been judged and I've been, yeah. So
it
it's rough.
really, I mean, grief and loss like really changes your perspective on just so many things.
It does. It changes everything. It really does.
Sometimes you don't even realize it until years later and you're like, wow,
Yes.
like I'm
Yes,
completely different than who I used to be.
absolutely. It's really, and sometimes it's hard to pinpoint. Like, if someone were to say, well, what? I don't know. Like, I can't verbalize it. It's just more, I feel, how is it become more compassionate, more understanding, more tolerant, more, I don't know. I feel all these things because of suffering, because you never think your life is going to go down a particular path, right? That's one thing that always makes me laugh inside, is when I hear a young person, so old, but I hear someone in their 20s, for example, say, well, I want 2 kids. I'm gonna have 2 kids. I'm gonna have 3 kids. And I'm like, you don't know what you're gonna have. And I feel like saying that, nothing, but I don't, because you don't want to be that guy, right? But that's something I always find in my head when I hear young people with such grand plans, and I think to myself, God, I hope for you that works that way. I hope. And on the flip side, when it does, you're like, huh, so why do you get,
I know
right?
it's I know. I mean, even now, like I do have living children, but we went through infertility and 3 losses, and I'm like, well, how come they got to have 3 kids and no issues? Like, and I'm like, okay, you have children, like let's not be
Yeah,
grateful, but it's hard. It permanently
it
changes
does.
our views on all that.
It does. Suffering, you don't want to invalidate your suffering. And if you had 3 losses, that's 3 losses too many that you didn't deserve to have. And it sucks.
It
And
does.
sucks. And it's
Like
okay.
none of us should have to be here today,
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's okay to say that it sucks, it's okay to live in that. And yeah, because then you feel guilty the good days where you're laughing and you have fun and you go on vacation. I go on vacation, you know what I mean? I have fun, but everything has a underlying layer of, but you live with it so long that you don't even realize it. Like, I don't remember what it was like before. I
Yeah.
don't. I had my daughters at 30 years old, so like my life is split down before the girls and after the girls. Before 30, after 30. And it's unfortunate, but that's the
Yeah.
path that I was given for whatever reason. Universe, whatever reason. It's what,
Like, I'm
When
not happy with you, universe, world, whoever
yeah,
did this.
yeah, exactly. So it is. And then you get also the people who don't, sometimes I feel some people don't want to, I don't know, reach out to me, get close to me, whatever it is, because they feel, oh my God, like I've had people tell me, like, I feel bad telling you this because like you have it so much worse. So they don't want to confide in me if their kids are sick or whatever, because their kid's life isn't in danger when they're sick, and I feel it's isolating because you're like, no, but I'm your friend. Like, come to me with, right? But there is a small, if I'm honest, there is a small part of me going, God, I wish my biggest problem was an ear infection. And so, and I'm just being honest, right? And it's
Yeah.
people can take it as they want. And that's that thought is buried deep in my head, but I do bury it because I want to be a good person and I want to be available to people who need me.
But I think it's totally fine to think those things because how can you not think those things?
Yeah.
You're just, as long as you're not out there like saying it all the time to
Yeah.
people, right?
Well, that's it. Because two feelings, can you imagine? Like, I have nobody in my life if I was that way. Because I think these feelings can live, I think a lot of people think it's either or, but you can have two
Mhm.
feelings existing at the same time, even if those feelings contradict.
Yeah.
And that's part of, like I've heard this many a time on, together at the same time without blending the two. It's a quote that I love that I heard somewhere. And I feel like that explains my life a lot. Together at the same time without blending the two. That's
I like that.
right. Yeah.
That sums up infertility and loss there for you.
Yes. Abs- when I see people saying I'm trying and I can't, my heart aches for them because it's like, why? Because when you're trying and you can't, everyone around you is having babies. And you're like, you got the people who sneeze and end up pregnant. And you're like, what?
You're like, why is it so hard for me and so easy for literally everybody else?
Absolutely. And some people who, quite frankly, have no business having babies, right? Children in abusive households and all that stuff. And you're like, gosh, I'm a good person. I'm not gonna, and it's hard to see why
It is.
random this way. And
It makes you feel like you just like did something like you're a bad person or
yeah,
I don't know that you did something that you're being punished somehow.
yeah, yeah, it is. You do think that way sometimes. I don't, and it depends the day, right? There are days where like I'm being punished for something, and then there are days where I'm like everything is just random, and
Mm.
it's I guess nobody ever really knows, right? And then that's where kind of faith comes in again, right? Because some people feel there's like a purpose. I just don't see it. Mm.
And I just think it's important to acknowledge that those kind of feelings that we have them and that it's okay to have them.
Ah,
We don't have to be happy, grateful 100% of the time.
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't like toxic positivity,
Mhm.
right? I know that's like a buzz term now, but it's true. Like, it's okay to say it sucks. It's okay because sometimes it sucks. And then tomorrow it doesn't suck. And
Yeah.
then it sucks less. There's like varying degrees. And I think, and I'm moving my hands like listeners can see that, but I think it's just really important when it sucks to just feel it.
Mhm. I think that's part of letting the grief, processing the grief.
Yes. You have to. You have to talk about the grief. You have to you have to acknowledge it, whatever it is that helps you acknowledge it. Pictures, talking about it, remembering dates, putting up flowers, going to visit grave sites if your loved ones are buried, whatever it may be for you. I like to visit my daughter's grave. Some people that doesn't give them comfort, and that's okay. So it's funny because her grave has a stone with my name on it, and because I want to be with her, and her dad's name on it. And some people think it's weird, like, oh, it's your ex-husband. I'm like, well, we're her parents, so it's not weird to want to be buried with her. And they think it's weird that I have my name on a stone. And I say, well, newsflash, we're all gonna die. So I take comfort in knowing what it looks like, where I'll be, I'll rest. And that gives me a lot of comfort. And I tell people that. And it makes people uncomfortable. Not
Mhm.
everybody, but it makes some people uncomfortable. But that's a them problem, not a me problem. So I will. People say, how many children do you have? That question
That's
is
the
the
worst question.
worst question.
Like, just don't ask it, please.
Yeah. Yeah. Even at the beginning, when I said I have 3 children, like I hesitated for a beat, but it's a terrible question.
Yeah, like let's just stop asking people that. Like we can make small talk another way, right?
Yes, absolutely. But part of me is a little, what's the word, bratty, or like there's a word for it, I can't think of it. But example, when people ask questions like, I'll talk about my daughter and how she likes things that are not age appropriate, obviously, because so she watches things like Paw Patrol and she'll watch PJ Masks. She's a little bit behind. She's not into the bluey thing, but she still likes Dora the Explorer, Bubble Guppies, all. And I'll be like, "Oh, my daughter loves Mario and Sonic and she loves Paw Patrol." And they're like, "How old is your daughter?" And I'm like, "She's 17." Complete brat. And I don't even, and they're like, "Okay." And then I elaborate afterwards. It's a little mean, but
You're like, but you had that moment.
I did. It was fun for the 30 seconds when I did it to see their face. And it sounds so like petty, but I don't care.
I
Life's
don't
short. It's
know.
fun.
Sometimes we have to do it.
We do.
I
But
can't
yeah,
say I never have my petty moments too.
that's it. And so yeah, I do. I'll be like, "Oh, today's anniversary that my daughter died," and like I'll tell people. I don't shy away from talking about the day she died. I don't shy away from saying that she died. I don't. And I don't shy away from words either. Passed away and all that. Everyone uses words that they're comfortable with, but I'll be like, my daughter's dead. I'll say the word. It's like not a bad word. She's not alive. And it doesn't bother me. Oh, it's so rough. I'm like, well, no,
Like
it's the
it's what happened.
yeah, I didn't lose her. She's not lost somewhere. Like I lost her, but you know what I mean? Like so I can be blunt. I think that's a little off-putting for some people, but it's maybe it's how I cope. I don't know. It could be a coping mechanism. It's just
No, I mean, sometimes I think just the whole idea around death is just an uncomfortable subject for a lot of people. Like nobody wants to think about it, especially nobody wants to think about it when it comes to children and babies.
yeah. Yeah, no, it's like absolutely. They are uncomfortable and I find I'm comfortable with it. I don't know if grief has made me comfortable with it. Well, comfortable, right, to an extent. But yeah, I don't know if it's because of the grieving that makes me comfortable talking about it. And I don't, I mean, I fear it a bit just because it's unknown, but I'm not like some people don't even want to talk about it, right? Like, just don't.
Yeah.
I have family members where I made a comment to my mom when we got all our plots. I made sure we had a spot for everyone in our family because my son was 4 at the time. My daughter Ava was a baby, and I thought we could all go in a car accident one day. And I wanted to make sure all of us were together. And so we bought enough for the whole family. And my mother was like, when I said that there's a potential spot for my son, she was like, he is gonna grow up and have his own family. And she was not having that. And I said, well, you don't know that. Like you don't know that. And so I have a contingency plan in case we could all be together at least.
One of the bad things about loss is now you start thinking about all the things that could happen.
Yes, absolutely. Your brain goes there all the time because it's already there. I had someone make a really good comment once who had a premature child, and she said to me, I don't know what you're feeling like because I lived with the threat of losing my child, but they pulled through. She goes, you had that threat, and that threat made good on its promise. So you know what that feels like. And that changes your perspective on anything. So when people say, oh, don't worry, I'm going to worry because the worst has happened. So that makes worrying very, very, it makes me very anxious when I worry. I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand, but it like I feel like I can't even speak when I'm because, it's
I can definitely relate to that.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, is there anything else that you'd like to share or add before we wrap up?
I don't know. I don't. I don't know. I feel like I've been rambling. I don't know. I just hope that someone takes something from this. I hope it's helpful in some way. I hope someone who, I don't know, it when I had my breakdown, it really scared me. And that's something I tell people all the time. I don't tell people I had a breakdown, although I'm telling you, but it's to not bury what they're feeling. To talk, even if you're talking about it all the time, it doesn't matter. If you have people worth having in your life, they will sit and let you have your space. And you need to take that space when you need it. And if people aren't having it, then they're not worth having in your life. I mean, I really feel that. You don't need a big circle of people. You just need a handful of people who get you. And I just hope that people find that in their life. I don't know what I would do without my husband. I don't. He just sits there and listens. It doesn't say a word. Uh, it's he is more than I deserve, I'll tell you that. He's more than I deserve.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story with us.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you reaching out.
Thank you so much, Susan, for sharing your story with us. She's just experienced so many different types of grief: infertility, miscarriage, twin loss, having a surviving twin, having a special needs child, and anticipatory grief, just to name a few. None of these things are easy. And as Susan mentioned, people tend to treat twins as interchangeable. Well, at least you got to keep one in all of those wonderful comments. But there is such a unique grief that comes from losing one twin and then having a surviving twin. They are two separate but equally loved babies. Yes, life can be more challenging with twins, but I really don't think any mom would trade a baby away for a, quote, easier life. So please stop making these types of comments. Remember and talk about both babies, not just the surviving baby. Remember those important dates. Check on your lost mom and dad friends. I promise you will make us happy that you said their name, or remembered their birthday, or remembered the day they died. We just want to know that our babies, all of our babies, are remembered. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please leave a review or rating on Apple or Spotify. It only takes a moment and really helps the show reach more loss and infertility families. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, we are all in this together.